Okay, guys, let's talk about naming polynomials. Naming polynomials. So I'm looking here at problems 11 through, if I flip to the other page, through problem 20. So how do we name polynomials? Well, there's two ways to name polynomials. One way is to name them according to what is their degree. Okay, so we got degree. What is degree? The degree has to do with the largest exponent. And on this test, we're going to see polynomials that have degrees of 1, so first degree polynomials. We're going to see polynomials that have degrees of 2, second degree polynomials. And we're going to see third degree polynomials that have a largest exponent of 3. So for example, this polynomial right here has an invisible 1 exponent, so we'd call that a first degree. Over here, this polynomial has a largest exponent of 2, so we call that a second degree. And over here, this polynomial in 17 has a largest exponent of 3. We call that a third degree. So what do we call polynomials according to their degree? If it's a first degree, we call it a linear polynomial. If it's a second degree, we call it a quadratic polynomial. And if it's a third degree, we call it a cubic polynomial. What else could we call polynomials? Well, we also had names for polynomials depending on how many terms, or the number of terms. What's a term? A term is a group of numbers together in a clump, you could say, that are separated by pluses and minuses. So all the pluses and minuses in the polynomials, how many groups of numbers do those separate the polynomial into? However many that is the number of terms. Let's look at some examples. First term polynomial, there's an example. You can see there's no pluses and minuses, so there's really just one clump of numbers, a 4 and an x and a cubed. That's a first term polynomial. We call those monomials. Monomials. Let's look at a second, or a two-term polynomial. Would be, this is an example here. I've got a -7 separated by a plus sign from the v squared. So the plus sign separates out into two terms, which means that is what's called a binomial, a two-term polynomial. So these are binomials. What about if it's got 3 terms? What's an example of 3 terms? Well, look at problem 11. I've got 2 plus signs, and they're separating things out into 3 terms, -7b squared plus 9 plus 7b. So that's a 3-term polynomial, which we call a trinomial. These are called trinomials. All right, so let's look at some polynomials and name them. Problem 11. What's the degree? Remember, I'm looking for the largest exponent. I've got an exponent of 2, an exponent of, well, the 9 doesn't seem to have any exponents, and the b has an invisible exponent of 1. So what's the biggest one? It looks like it's the 2, which means this is a quadratic. Quadratic. And how many terms does it have? It's got 1, 2, 3 terms, so it's a quadratic trinomial. Problem 12. Largest exponent is that invisible 1 that I marked earlier. So it's a linear, because it's first degree, linear. And how many terms does it have? It has 2, which means it's a linear binomial. It's a linear binomial. Problem 13, the largest exponent is 2 again, so quadratic. And it's got 2 terms, -7 and v squared, so it's a binomial. (14), 1 term, but third degree, so third degree cubic. 1 term monomial. It's a cubic monomial. 15. First degree, invisible exponent of 1, linear, binomial, 2 terms, the negative 2 and the negative 9n. 16. Quadratic, because the largest exponent's 2. Quadratic. And it's got 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. '17 now. 17, the largest exponent appears to be the 3. The 3 is bigger than the 2. So it's a cubic. It's a cubic what? It's a cubic trinomial because it's got 1, 2, 3 terms. Trinomial. 17, linear. Its largest exponent is that invisible 1 modifying the first v, which means it's linear. And it's a binomial because it's got the 2 terms, the 7v and the 6. 2 more of these. 2 more of these. All right, we've got 19. Largest exponent, there's an invisible 1 here, and there's just a 2 there. 2 is bigger than 1, so we have a quadratic. And it's got 2 terms, which means it's a binomial. Last one. Invisible 1 exponent. Linear. And it's only got 1 term, which means it's a monomial.